So welcome. We were looking at phrasal verbs today, and this came up, and it was quite unexpected. I wasn't expecting to teach this today. But when we look at phrasal verbs, there are 4 different types of phrasal verb that we use. And I've listed them here and given some examples of how we use them. The first ones are those phrasal verbs that we use literally. Sometimes we can use them on their own, like stand up, sit down. We can, of course, expand them. Could you sit down, please? Or could you sit down over there or on the chair? But they're very literal phrasal verbs. Because remember, we can have phrasal verbs that are literal and phrasal verbs that are idiomatic. These ones are very literal, where we stand up, we sit down, we go out, we look out. That one's actually not very literal, but it's we can use them just on their own. What does look out mean, by the way? If I say look out,
Watch out.
Be careful.
be careful, watch out, be careful, yeah, be careful. So they're mainly literal, but as you can see, not always. But they're phrasal verbs which can be used just actually on their own. We call them type 1 phrasal verbs, literally or on their own, or on their own. Type 2 phrasal verbs are the ones that were separable, and this is what made me write all of this down today, using your expression today, Daniela. Type 2 phrasal verbs are phrasal verbs where you can take the verb and the preposition and you can separate it. You don't need to, but you can. And I've written 4 examples from your example, Daniela. I signed up my daughter. You signed her up for the dance classes. But you could also take my daughter and open the phrasal verb up and put the object, which is my daughter, inside the phrasal verb. I signed my daughter up. So you've opened up the phrasal verb. You could also change the object for an actual object pronoun. Here we've got my daughter, so it's her. I signed her up. But you cannot, if you change it into an object, you cannot put it at the end. You have to open up the phrasal verb. You cannot say, I signed up her. It sounds bad, okay? So you've got 3 possibilities, but 1 that you cannot do. I signed up my daughter. I signed my daughter up. I signed her up. That's it. The other type of phrasal verb is the phrasal verb that is not separable. That under no circumstances can you separate this. So, for example, I'm looking for my keys. You cannot say, I'm looking my keys for, I'm looking them for. It doesn't matter whether you change it to an object or not. You cannot separate the phrasal verb. The other one we did today was, oh, I was walking down the street and I came across my friend. That's great, but you cannot say, I came my friend across. You cannot separate some phrasal verbs. And you need to learn the ones that you can separate, and you need to learn about the ones that you cannot separate. And finally, a verb with 2 or more prepositions. Mainly, the most common thing is a verb that has 2 additional prepositions. So, this is the one we learned today, to make off with something. So we've used 2 prepositions. Remember, to make off with something means to steal something. But I added another one here which we use a lot. We used it this term, we used it last term. To put up with something, or to put up with somebody. It means to, does anyone remember what it means if you have to put up with something?
Tolerate.
To tolerate, yes. To stand, to tolerate, to bear something. We use it a lot in the negative, when we just can't tolerate something anymore. I say, oh, I can't put up with this anymore. I can't put up with that person anymore. So this is another fantastic example of a type 4 phrasal verb where we've used 2 prepositions. And these are the 4 types of phrasal verb that we use. Now, before we finish, just remember that most phrasal verbs can be used literally like these ones, but a lot of them, the key learning for phrasal verbs is when we start using them in an idiomatic way, when they mean something completely different. Look out, I might look out of the window, for example. That's literal. But when I say look out, be careful, that's an idiomatic use of the same phrasal verb. And that's an interesting thing that we need to look at and learn as well.
Yeah.